The stories we tell about ancient Rome are often wrong. We think we know about its laws, its people, its morality. We picture a world of order and power where every action had a clear and logical consequence. But the truth is darker and far more strange. What we think we understand about Roman justice is just a thin veil over a system that was deeply chaotic. The real story isn't about the laws themselves, but about who they protected and who they destroyed. The common narrative about how Rome managed its underworld is a complete misdirection. What truly happened to those who operated outside the law reveals a principle that governed Rome far more than any decree written on stone or bronze. And its final consequence is something that history almost never mentions, but it shaped everything that came after. We're going to look at the fate of women who worked in the shadows of Roman society, outside the official system. These were the unregistered, the unauthorized, the ones who didn't pay the tax or sign their name in the official ledger. We are taught that Rome was pragmatic, that it legalized and taxed what it couldn't eliminate. This is true, but it's only half the story. The real story is about what happened when that system of control was defied. The punishment wasn't just a fine or a flogging. It was something else entirely, an act of social and legal alchemy that twisted the very identity of the person being punished. The consequence was so profound, it's hard to even call it a punishment. It was a transformation. To understand this, we need to forget the idea of a Roman courtroom as we imagine it. For an unauthorized prostitute, there was no grand trial. The process was swift, brutal, and public. The authority in this case was the aedile, a city magistrate responsible for public order, markets, and games. When a woman was caught working without a license, she was brought before him, not in a basilica, but often in the very marketplace or street where she was found. There was no jury of her peers, no lengthy defense. The verdict was usually immediate, but the sentence was not what you would expect. She wasn't simply fined and sent on her way. She wasn't exiled. She was subjected to a legal procedure called professio. This is the key. Normally, professio was a voluntary declaration. A woman wishing to become a registered prostitute would go before the aedile, declare her intent, and have her name entered into a public register. It was a formal acknowledgement of her new status, which came with certain legal restrictions, but also a form of protection. But for the unauthorized, this process was inverted. It was forced upon her. She was dragged before the magistrate and compelled to declare herself a prostitute in public. Her name was entered into the ledger not as a choice, but as a brand. This public declaration was the core of the punishment. It was an act of pure humiliation. Imagine being forced to announce your own shame in the middle of a crowded forum, with merchants, shoppers, soldiers, and senators all stopping to watch. Your identity was stripped away and replaced with a single, permanent label, meretrix, a registered prostitute. But the cruelty was in the timing. She was being punished for not registering by being forcibly registered. It seems like a strange paradox. Why would the state punish someone for avoiding a system by forcing them into it? The answer is not about justice. It's about control. Rome did not care about the morality of the act itself. It cared about order, taxation, and the clear definition of social classes. An unregistered woman was a loose thread in the fabric of society. She was an unknown, an untaxed entity operating outside of established categories. Forcing her into the registry solved this problem. It took an element of chaos and brought it under state control. She was no longer invisible. She was now known, categorized, and most importantly, taxable. The punishment wasn't about stopping her. It was about co-opting her. The state essentially said, "You will not operate on your own terms. You will operate on ours." And here is where the story takes a turn. This forced registration had a devastating, permanent consequence that went far beyond public shame. Once her name was in that ledger, it could never be removed. Ever. Even if she stopped working as a prostitute the very next day. Even if she married, or inherited a fortune, or dedicated her life to the gods. For the rest of her life, in the eyes of Roman law, she was a prostitute. This status, known as infamia, carried a heavy weight. It meant she could not make a will. She could not inherit property from most people. She could not give testimony in most courts. Her legal personhood was permanently damaged. Think about the implications of that. A single act of defiance, a single moment of being caught, led to a lifetime of legal and social paralysis. She was trapped. Other criminals might serve their time or pay their fine and be done with it. But her sentence never ended. It was a life sentence of social marginalization, inscribed in an official public record for all to see. This is the detail that is so often overlooked. The punishment wasn't the event. It was the unchangeable record of the event. It was the state's power to define a person forever. This system reveals a fundamental truth about Roman power. It wasn't just enforced with legions and swords. It was enforced with ink and papyrus. It was the power of the record, the power of the list. By controlling who was on the list, the state controlled who had rights, who had a future, and who was condemned to live in the shadow of their past. The aedile's ledger was more powerful than any prison wall because it imprisoned a person's identity. The woman was not just punished for a crime, she became her crime. The law didn't just judge her actions, it consumed her entire being. This concept wasn't limited to prostitutes. The Roman state used the power of public records and permanent infamia to control other groups as well: gladiators, actors, and certain types of entertainers. Anyone whose profession was considered shameful was placed on a list, and that list defined their existence. It was a system for managing society's undesirables, not by eliminating them, but by branding them and locking them into a permanent underclass. It was a way of ensuring that the social hierarchy remained rigid and that those at the bottom could never rise. And this brings us to the final, hidden meaning of this story. This wasn't just about punishing women or regulating an industry. This was a rehearsal for a much larger form of social control that Rome would later perfect. The principle was simple: identify a group, define them as a threat to order, create a public record of their identity, and then use that record to strip them of their rights. The act of registration, the public declaration, the permanent mark of infamia, these were tools of power. And these tools would be used again and again, long after the Roman Empire fell. What happened to these women was a microcosm of a much larger historical force. The idea that a state can permanently define a person based on a single action or association, and record that definition in an inescapable public ledger. The punishment was not the fine, the whip, or the jail cell. The true punishment was the list. It was the official, bureaucratic act of rewriting a human being's identity and making that new identity permanent and inescapable. The woman caught working in the shadows was not just punished. She was reclassified. She was made into an example, not of broken moral laws, but of the absolute power of the state to define reality itself. That is the true legacy of this Roman practice. It's not a story about ancient vice. It's a story about the origins of bureaucratic control and how a simple list can become the most powerful weapon of all. I hope this has given you a new perspective on how history is often simplified. The real stories are always more complex and have echoes that reach us today. If you found this interesting, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please share this with someone who might appreciate it, and subscribe for more hidden stories from the past. Thank you for watching.